It's time for the tabletop role-playing game community's favorite game show, Wheel of Irrelevant Controversy. It's our first episode of the new year, and today's controversy is ding. Not surprisingly, tabletop role-playing being not as good as it was. It's not as good as it was in my day. So we are responding to an article, an essay, whatever you want to call it, by Ben RIGGS, author of The Secret History of Dungeons & Dragons. Secrets of Blackmoor is the only history I pay attention to, but whatever. Regarding 2024 D&D, and if he thinks that the golden age of tabletop role-playing game, or D&D, is ending, is over. That's assuming we ever had one. I mean, some would argue that the golden age of tabletop role-playing ended with the 80s. Some people would say that it ended with 4th edition. Some people would say it ended when the OGL nonsense started and Wizards of the Coast started doing the whole, racist, sexist, white man can't leave the hobby long enough. And others are like, no, maybe it's just starting. Maybe what's going to happen next year will reignite the passion of independent creators because we're sick of D&D. Or maybe 6th edition will charge a mad rush of new players to D&D who want to get back to it because it's the 50th anniversary. Maybe we're just seeing the beginning of the golden age. Maybe there never was a golden age of role-playing. Because, at the end of the day, it's a fucking silly game about elves with sticks. And it doesn't, it's unique to each individual. So my golden age of role-playing might be completely different than your golden age of role-playing. And since it is subjective to the individual, there's no way to agree other than sales and the amount of attention D&D is getting, or tabletop role-playing game is getting. Well, then yes, it's getting way more attention now than it did 10 years ago. It's getting way more attention now than it did 50 years ago. Not that because it's way more popular in any way, shape, or form. It's because this thing we're communicating on right now exists. And this is the way 99% of the technologically, that's a word I think, able population of the planet gets their information, as opposed to 20 years ago when we relied on print or word of mouth or TV or mail. So of course it's getting more attention. More attention means more numbers. But now that's maybe petering off? I don't know. Let's read Ben's article and see if we agree or disagree. I've posted the links. This is going to be found on ENWorld. Thank you, as always, Morris and ENWorld, for posting this stuff and allowing people like me to use it. All right, so we are watching the bright and special time in the tabletop role-playing game industry pass away before our eyes. Bright and special? Ben, I would say there was nothing bright and special about the last year. 2023 was one of the ugliest years of the tabletop role-playing game industry in a long time. Around the start of the 2010s, we saw the dawn of the new golden age of tabletop role-playing games. Since then, huge number of new players have found the hobby thanks to Stranger Things and Critical Role. These new fans discovered a vibrant and thumbing tabletop role-playing game industry that was D&D 20 fantasy family of games, dominated, of course, by D&D, but rich with other games published under the OGL, and fertile in the depths of the old school renaissance. There were other mainstream publishers with storied brands such as Call of Cthulhu, Deadlands, and Shadowrun. Lately, there was a flourishing indie tabletop role-playing game scene that revolutionized what a tabletop role-playing game was, such as Apocalypse World. The influx of games created a rising tide that lifted all boats. Novice gamers started out playing D&D 5e, but went on to discover other games because the OGL, countless companies and designers could make money creating D&D 5e product. Because the increasing number of games, even strange, freaky, or weird games could find an audience. Have you heard of the Apollo 47 Technical Manual, the RPG? Yes, I have heard of the Apollo 47 Technical Manual RPG, and I fucking love it. But recent developments make it clear that the Radiant Golden Age is ending, as surely as the Steam ended Edges, as surely as the Age of Sail, or as hobbyists bearing a ring ended the Third Age of Middle-earth. The doom of our time approaches. In the wake of the OGL scandal of last year, a number of companies have launched new tabletop role-playing games intended to move them past the possibility of Wizards of the Coast ever threatening their business ever again. Some of these games grossed millions in crowdfunding campaigns. All have been obviously positively reviewed. Well, not all of them, Ben. Some cite the success of these games, which are intended to replace 5e content for the companies involved, a sign of the continual health and growth of the tabletop role-playing game industry. They are not. Rather, they are signs that the industry has peaked and may be about to enter decline. Ben, this happened in the 80s with GURPS and stuff like that, but okay. This is kind of boring. Let's give you some pretty pictures to look at while I'm talking. You know, if I'm just going to read an article, you should have something pretty to look at. Like kittens! After the open gaming license crisis of 2023, I became pessimistic about the damage the attempt to kill the OGL had done to the hobby. Others told me the result of the crisis would be a blooming of thousands of flowers. It discouraged from using 5e by Wizards of the Coast attempts to kill the OGL, we would get an amazing new tabletop role-playing games. Well, we had a lot of promises. Maybe every single one of those tabletop role-playing games is going to be amazing. Maybe everyone will be fun and so captivating that lawns will go unmowed, pets unfed, and diapers unchanged because we're also busy playing one of those games. That's a problem for other things like video games, but sure. The problem is the business is devilishly difficult. Only very rarely does the creation of a phenomenal game actually lead to financial success. How is that different than any other point in time in the hobby? Hey, it's Ironcaster and Dice Tales. Hi, guys. Good morning. Happy New Year. Kitten! And the death of the OGL and the creation of these games has fundamentally changed the industry in such a way that will be harder for those companies to make money in the future. A difficult business is about to become more difficult. How is that different than the 80s and the 90s? Consider the state of the industry a mere 18 months ago. Countless publishers, from Monty Cook to Kobold Press to Wizards of the Coast, were all making 5e material. It was easy to purchase products from multiple publishers because of if they were running 5e, you could use the work of all these companies at your table. It made it easier for companies to share customers. The new TTRPG birthed by the OGL crisis was about to make that sort of customer sharing much more harder. CDM is publishing a tabletop role-playing game where you roll 2d6. Pathfinder 2nd Edition has no alignment and changed ability scores. I didn't know that. Critical Role has dropped 5e like a dead cockroach as in playtesting its own fantasy game, Daggerheart, which uses 2d12s, and the failure of a horror game that was Candle Obscura. They haven't dropped 5e. They're still using it on the show. And of course, there is the Rising Godzilla that is 6th edition, which scientists say will attack our shores in the spring of 2024. There's no hint of the OGL or whatever for whatever that game will be, which is a concern regarding the SRD. And will the SRD apply to 6? The problem is 5e was not just a game. It was a massive community of players. Countless companies would thrive making products for that community. Countless companies making products for the community has always existed. Judges Guild, Palace of the Vampire Queen, the very first D&D module was produced by a third party. It's not that these companies don't exist, it's that they can't, really maintain because just supply and demand. But I mean, they've always existed. There's always been symbiotic relationships. That hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed, again, is we're more aware of it because of this internet thing. Meanwhile, more kittens. These new games are shattering of the community. Instead of countless companies working to make your 5e game better, they are now asking you to become MCDM or Darrington Press or Paizo or D&D 6e players. We're entering an era of division, faction, and balkanization. Well, that depends on the Creative Commons and 2024 D&D, doesn't it? If the Creative Commons remains as written and we can still use the ORC and the 5.1 Creative Commons, then people will still make third-party product for 2024 D&D, and they'll still make product for 5e because they're going to assume a lot of people won't ship. In fact, I think third-party 5e product or 6e or whatever you want to call it will do amazing in 2024 because I don't think the audience for 6e is there. All this has happened before. In the 1990s, TSR, the first company to publish D&D, embarked on publishing settings after setting after setting for the game. By 1997, over a dozen settings were sold by the company. Fans stopped being fans of D&D and instead became fans of particular settings and would only buy products for that setting. In 1997, TSR was near death as setting releases had plummeted from the hundreds of thousands of copies in the 1980s to a mere 7,152 copies sold for Birthright campaign setting in the first year of its release. D&D was only saved from a terrible fate by Wizards of the Coast and their fat stack of Magic the Gathering money when they purchased TSR in 1997. Some might say it's unfair to compare the different settings of the 90s to the different systems of today. Settings and systems are different after all, and I do agree with the point. Switching systems is a bigger ask than switching settings. Therefore, this change should leave a larger impact on sales. Agree? And it's all happening again. The TTRPG audience is fracturing at the seams, and this will hurt sales and growth. That is absolutely 100% true. The TTRPG community is just eating itself from within in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before. Sure, the popularity of D&D has faltered in the past. You know, I remember a huge chunk of the 80s when nobody was playing D&D. Everybody was playing GURPS. Every campaign I was in was being converted to GURPS. And then Vampire and Cyberpunk came along. Plus you had Rifts. Nobody was playing D&D. There's a huge decade of my life in the 70s and early 80s when we didn't play D&D. We played superhero role-playing games. Let's focus only on MCDM, which is, made about $4 million. Every campaign after this will struggle to get the same sort of sales numbers as people slowly bleed away to the competition. If you are going into this expecting to make $4 million, then you've already failed. You should just expect to hopefully break even and actually get interest in your game. This is Monty Cook's or Matt Colville's 4 million MCDM is a fluke, guys. Paizo will say, check out our competing fantasy game. Wizards of the Coast will batter us all with the punishing wave of marketing, trying to convince us all the newness and hotness of D&D 2024. Why it may be new and hot, but I have my doubts, and fans will bleed away. Furthermore, what will happen to the YouTube channels, such as the one that led to MCDM's success? Matt Colville is a master communicator and was a major evangelist of D&D in his channel's heyday. He is passionate, intelligent, and inspiring. If Dungeon Masters could go to a locker room and get a pep talk from the coach, that coach would be Matt Colville. Disagree, but okay. How much time is Matt Colville going to devote to D&D now, since it's essentially his competition? Probably not a lot, unless it doesn't sell. In the past year, he has put out less than 20 videos on his channel. Those videos now range widely from topic, from TV reviews and interviews with language scholars to some D&D content, and the discussion of the creation of his new RPG. Go back 5 years, and Colville was putting out video after video after video of fantastic advice about running D&D, usually with 5e. He dispensed some of the best advice on TTRPG I've ever seen. Obviously, you've never watched Runehammer Hank. But it all appears his content is fundamentally shifting, and he is asking that his audience go with him somewhere new. Let's look at MCDM's recent efforts from the point of view of Wizards of the Coast. It is all ruin, disaster, and calamity. Master communicator and D&D fanatic Matt Kelville has gone from convincing people to try D&D to explaining how best to play D&D to instead asking all his subscribers to stop playing P&D and play his game instead. I don't think he's ever said that. I think he's just said, hey, play my game. And people are going, yes, I will play your game. Not to mention that Critical Role, a huge reason for the recent surge in the popularity of D&D, that's true, is likewise stopping their support of D&D and asking their millions of subscribers to start playing one of their new games instead. I will not mention that, least it further trouble the sleep of the D&D people at Wizards of the Coast. What 2 million people don't buy 6th edition? Is that true? Well, they're definitely trying with Candle Obscura, but I think it's safe to say Candle Obscura is a failure. People said similar things. Oh, that it will break the game, that it'll break. Yeah, but look how quickly those people turned on Kelsey. In summary, all these events are interfering with the development that created a golden age of tabletop role-playing game. The removal of D&D from Critical Role likely hurts everyone involved. They haven't done it yet. For years, Critical Role's pitch was watch voice actors play D&D. Now it's the pitch of watch our voice actors play Candle Obscura. No, that is completely untrue. They're saying, hey, watch D&D, but also watch us play Myths and Candle Obscura and Mortal Kombat and Legend of Zelda and Persona, and let us know which ones you like. They've never said, stop watching our main show and only watch Candle Obscura. But what is Candle Obscura? The brand recognition that drove people to Critical Role is gone. Similarly, the splintering of the D&D 5e community will make it harder for new designers to break into the industry and harder for established companies to attract new customers. Growth in the tabletop role-playing field will slow. Probably. I mean, it's never going to be as big as it was over the last 5 years because you would have to have a repeat of all the same things that happened over the last 5 years to get even close to what happened, to repeating that. And unless you have a time machine or a hot tub time machine, how do you predict that? And it's not like this hasn't happened before. Again, there is huge chunks of the 90s when nobody was playing D&D. There was huge chunks of the 80s when nobody was playing D&D. At least where I was. I don't know about the rest of the world. What might the future look like according to Mr. RIGGS? 6th edition will not sell as well as 5th edition. Even more firings will follow. Wizards, which struggled to know what to do with D&D when it was a success. I mean, come on, guys. You didn't make an Honor Amongst Thieves starter set? Well, I totally agree with that one. Will be flummoxed by what to do when it is perceived as a failure, and Hasbro fires them. No crowdfunding campaign will ever do better than the initial campaign to fund MCDM. So he's saying nobody else will ever make $4 million. That's a bold statement. Of course, there's still no really explanation why he made $4 million. I mean, imagine if that game's a piece of crap, guys. Kobold Press post OGL game Tales of the Valiant has been criticized for being too similar to 5e. True, but that's not their fault. For Kobold Press, I see two futures. So do I. Perhaps they will slowly bleed fans in the same way other games are. But if D&D 6th edition is too different and people really don't want to move on from 5e, Kobold has positioned themselves to be the next Pathfinder. Completely 100% agree on that one. They could be the king of the hill. The frequency of $1 million tabletop role-playing game Kickstarters will decrease. That goes without saying. Attendance at major gaming conventions will plateau. Again, that goes without saying. Tabletop role-playing games will become less interesting, less exciting, less creative. And despite all the new systems, it will grow less diverse as it becomes even more harder to make up in the tabletop role-playing community broken into factions. So you mean like it's always been other than the past 5 years, okay? It was always fractioned in the 70s. It was always fractioned in the 80s. It was always fractioned in the 90s. It was always fractioned in the first part of the 2000s. You had your table playing D&D. You had your table playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. You had your table playing 4E. You had your table playing Pathfinder. You had your table playing V&V. You had your table playing Rifts. You had your table just playing Magic and saying, fuck it, I'm tired. You know, that's the way it always was. And the worst thing that ever happened was either people saying my edition's better than your edition, or, you know, whatever, the edition wars. That was the worst thing that ever happened until 4E. Then things got ugly, and then 5E came out, and then things got really ugly, and then January happened, and then things got extremely ugly, and now the worst enemy, well, D&D's worst enemy is Wizards of the Coast, but the tabletop role-playing game community's worst enemy is the tabletop role-playing game community. So the Golden Age sputters out, unless something truly dramatic and game-changing hits the industry. What could change this grim future? I suppose a group of publishers coalescing around a single system, like the ORC, might change matters, or something truly inconceivable, like 6E giving us a Creative Commons. That is the big if. That is the big if. So, yeah. And after last month's blood sacrifice upon the altar of profitability, who is even left at Wizards with the power and experience to advocate for such a thing? Well, certainly not Crawford or Kyle or Mackenzie. So I guess Chris. It has been a grand era to be a gamer, one which I have been fortunate to live through. Thank you, Ben. I don't know how much of this I believe in, I agree with. There are definitely some points he made that I totally agree with. There's definitely some points he made that I disagree with. And it's really, who cares? So I ask you, my 2 followers, do you believe the tabletop role-playing game Golden Age is ending? Or do you think it's starting? Or do you think it ended a while ago? Do you think there ever was a Golden Age? Maybe there wasn't. Maybe your Golden Age, Ironcaster, is completely different than my Golden Age and completely different than Dice Tales, because we're all individuals. And what I remember and experienced is unique to me. So my Golden Age of role-playing, the years I thought the gaming was best and I had the most fun, is completely different. And my memories are different because, you know, as I said, what I experienced is apparently unique to me, because when I talked to other people, their experiences were different. You know, I mean, I had a 10-year swath, 10, 12-year swath where nobody I knew was playing D&D. We were all playing Champions and Villains and Vigilantes and other superhero role-playing games. That's why I always say, you know, Marvel's my favorite, because there's a huge chunk of my life when all I was playing was Marvel and Villains and Vigilantes. I got to college, nobody was playing D&D. And then GURPS came out, and everybody was playing GURPS or Vampire or Rifts. You know, I left college and I moved. You know, that's when I really started playing D&D. The late end of the 80s and into the 90s. You know, and then I moved here to Site A, and it was just everybody was playing 3 until 4 came out, and then you had the first big splitting. The 4E fans versus the Pathfinder fans. And then we had 5E. And then everybody was playing 5E until recently, where nobody's playing 5E except for the Adventurers League, because Wizards of the Coast has killed the fan base, at least where I live. So my Golden Age was the 80s and early 90s. You know, from playing V&V with my friends in high school to playing GURPS in college to playing the 15-year-long TJ Storm Company of the Bull campaign. Those are my golden years. Everything else has just sort of been okay. I mean, I've had fun. I've definitely had good games. I've enjoyed my running, Freeport for 9 years and playing in the various games of Matthew Broman's. But compared to TJ's 15-year-long campaign or Barry's 5-year-long V&V game, nothing's come close for me. But that's me. So it's subjective, Ben. I think at the end of the day, it's subjection. But if you're looking at numbers, if you're looking at sales, if you're basing it purely on Kickstarters and sales, then yes, no Kickstarter is going to make as much money as Kickstarters are making now, because we're going into a recession and it's starting to get to the point where there's a glut. People are just like, I've already seen this. I mean, look at my personal response to Adventurer Conqueror King 2nd Edition, where everybody's telling me I have to get this game. And if I don't, I'm a horrible human being. And my response was, I already have this game. I already have 10 versions of this game. I also have Hank's game, Runehammer, which does, everything I need, so I don't need another game which has the exact same thing that I already have. But that's just me. So what do you think? Let me know what you're thinking about this, or does it even matter? I was watching Trevor Noah's new stand-up last night, and he brought up a really good point about this stuff doesn't matter. We let ourselves get distracted with these little things so that we don't focus on the big things, and we should be focusing on more important things, like I don't have enough money to pay rent. That's way more important than edition wars or the golden age of D&D dying, but we link onto these things. And once we link onto these things, we become incredibly hostile to anybody who doesn't think the way we think. And we love fighting over these things. And we're going to argue for days about the golden age of D&D or tabletop role-playing and whether Ben is right or wrong, when really it's pointless. It is a pointless argument. And there's way more important things going on than this. There's way more important things going on than the wokeification, than that. But those things are cool. You know what's cool? Kittens. All right, that's it for today. I can't think of anything else to talk about, but it's still early, which means there's still a chance Wizards of the Coast will do something stupid before the first week of 2024 comes to an end. I'm using that deer in the headlights analogy. We are just the deer, and the headlights coming towards us are Wizards of the Coast, and we're like, what are you going to do? Should I move? Should I stay here? Should I go backwards? I'm just waiting with trepidation for what you're going to do next, Wizards of the Coast, because look what you've done so far. Are you going to speed up and hit me? Are you going to swerve around me? Are you going to go backwards? I don't know. I'm just stuck in the headlights. Till next time, I'm the OGGM. If you appreciate the nonsense that comes out of my mouth, let me know. If you never want to hear me talk about this ever again, too bad. You had a chance to have me reach 2,000 subs where I would have never spoke about this again, or at least for a month as promised, but you didn't. You didn't, so you have no one to blame but yourselves if I keep talking about this. Till next time, stay safe out there. It's raining. And get off my land, you damn